Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging these fine conventions.
SoonerCon. SoonerCon is Central Oklahoma's longest-running pop culture convention. It is held in Norman, Oklahoma, and the next event is scheduled for June 24th through 26th, 2022. You can go to SoonerCon.com to sign up and get early bird pricing on admission. The Hellmouth Convention. The Hellmouth Convention is a celebration of fandoms such as Buffy, Firefly, and Dr. Horrible. It is scheduled for June 3rd through 5th, 2022 in Los Angeles, California. All proceeds raised will benefit various charities. Please go to thehellmouth.org for more information. On tap today, we have Jim Dirschberger. How are you doing today, good sir?
Very good. How are you, Aaron?
I am doing fantastic. I am so glad to have you here. And by the time the audience get this, they should be able to purchase your company's new game. You're from Wide Right Games, and you are producing Rifftrax, the game.
Yes, it is out if you are listening to this on May 5th, 2020 or later.
Yeah, it is. And this is something that just kind of fell in our laps there. I've been thinking for the longest time that a game based on something like MST3K would be great, but how would it come about? What would it be like? And then suddenly the Rifftrax game exists.
There we are. Yeah. I think it all started with our last game, What the Dub, which was a multiplayer party game where we're showing you video clips and there's a missing line of dialogue. Everyone in kind of a Jackbox game style way. You get on your phone and you go to a website, you enter in the replacement text. So someone in a clip from the 1950s says, "Hey, you want a cup of coffee?" And you write in something kind of smart ass to write in as response. We play it back with text to speech, and then you get to watch it and vote on your favorite ones. So yeah, we released that game, What the Dub, in 2021, and it kind of totally exceeded our expectations in terms of the streamers that played the game and the sales and the community and everything around it. We were just really excited about it. And, obviously, as you mentioned, in the back of our minds, being fans of Mystery Science Theater and Rifftrax, it was always kind of in the back of our mind. I mean, we're literally watching the Rifftrax Twitch channel 24/7 while we're making the game. So, Mike, Kevin, and Bill are like already in our minds. Wouldn't it be awesome to collaborate with those guys? So after we released the game, What the Dub, we tweeted at them and we just said, "Hey, thanks for the inspiration. Love you guys. Please don't sue us." They didn't. And in fact, they did the opposite. They guys at Rifftrax saw that, looked at the game, said, "Okay, there's something here," and reached out. And very quickly, we kind of found the terms of agreement here or engagement. We said, "Hey, this is how we want to do it. This is the scope of the game." And we started making it about a year ago. So it's been very quick. We've tried to take everything that worked well in What the Dub and make sure that it works exceptionally well in Rifftrax. All of the things, again, the great community, we basically looked at all of our support tickets, all of the tweets, anything someone said, "Hey, I wish this was in the game." We said, "Can we do it? What's the value to all the players?" And if we could do both, if both were valid, we put it in the game. So, there's a lot of, I call them quality of life fixes. There's some just minor stuff, little things about how the game is scored or being able to turn something off. That we put in the game. And of course, the centerpiece, though, is the content. And we're leaning on 15 years of Rifftrax content and jokes. They have a much better pre-cleared, not always public domain library. What the Dub was strictly public domain clips, whereas Rifftrax, you have licensed content. And then the jokes, the ability to use the guys and the writing team at Rifftrax. They wrote well over 3,000 jokes that are in the game. And all of those things combined, we have a spiritual successor to What the Dub but also something new and exciting for fans of Rifftrax and party games alike.
That is so cool. And I love the fact that you're able to take the Rifftrax body of work and distill it into this, because we have games on things like Star Wars and Star Trek and things that already have a substantial history to them and a lore. And people don't think of Rifftrax as having a lore, but it really does.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a Rifftrax Mystery Science Theater cinematic universe that we're tapping into.
Yes, and that's the kind of thing that, between the ice cream bunny and plankton and all those things that we just constantly reference because we've found the jokes. It's like a shared pain almost.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's the thing is I remember way back in the 90s watching cable television on sci-fi and coming across Mystery Science Theater, after I was like sneaking downstairs to watch Beavis and Butthead without my parents finding out, and that would be on and just like dying laughing. So, I feel like I go way back with these guys. I have tons of Mystery Science Theater on DVD, been subscribed to Rifftrax and bought, purchased all of their products throughout the years. But getting into this and meeting some of, just hearing feedback or interacting with like real Rifftrax fans, I feel like a total hack. Like I feel like a poser because there's some folks.
Never a poser in this community.
Yeah, of course everyone's friendly, but I'm just like, man, I thought I knew my Rifftrax, but clearly I am mistaken because there are some folks who they know every joke, every inside joke. True masters of the Rifftrax way of life,
It is a way of life because it's a way of looking at the world where no matter how serious something is, you can put a silly spin on it because you have to survive in this life.
Yeah. And there's the guy, each one of the riffers, Mike, Kevin, and Bill, they kind of have their own literally their own voice when it comes to the comedy. And this goes, back to Mystery Science Theater, the dynamic between Tom Servo, Crow, and Mike, like they have a different style, and how you look at it and how you kind of pick things apart. I love that perspective because nothing is sacred and nothing is too serious that you can't throw a joke in there. And not to get too philosophical, but it's a great way to look at life. Don't take yourself too seriously.
I'm glad you brought up the 90s because there's something that I'm really thinking of here, and I'm trying to spin it in a way that complements your game. Because number one, when you talk about Tom Servo and Crow, I see them like when I physically see them, I see reproductions of the puppets. It's like I'm meeting an old friend at a bar. It's like, oh, hey, there you are. Let's catch up, buddy. It's like you have that warm reaction to it. And this game you're describing sounds like a better version of those full motion video games from the Sega CD era.
Yeah.
It's like now we have the
FMV
technology
is back.
Yeah, and it's done right this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the components of this game, the centerpiece is video. You are essentially just watching video. We have an interface that kind of presents the score and the flow of the game for you, but essentially we funnel everything through this kind of VHS aesthetic. The hub of the game is a POV from a couch looking at a TV. The options menu is that blue crunchy lo-fi screen that if you ever had to reprogram your VCR will be very familiar. Like that's where you feel at home. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s or even the early 2000s when home video was the only way to consume movies, that's a view and that's a feeling that is very real. And we definitely wanted to capture that and bring inject that into the game experience.
And part of this is going to be exploring all this old content, this public domain weirdness that you've found, And that's something that definitely happened back in the VHS era. There were bargain bin tapes. There was stuff you would find, handed down from promotions and whatnot. That discovering film has changed so much, but it's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and I think we're now at a place where the folks who grew up with that kind of content and consuming content in that way are now creating their own content. I think one of the best examples I think in video games was Cuphead.
Mm-hmm.
The creators of Cuphead talked about going to their local video store or supermarket and renting, when you could rent VHS tapes from like Wegmans or your local, grocery store chain. They would have them right
Mm-hmm.
there, next to the bread. And they used to rent these public domain cartoon compilations
Mm-hmm.
that have that classic 30s and 40s cartoon aesthetic to it. And that made a huge impression on them. Not because they were necessarily, you go back and watch them and they're not great cartoons, but they're not what you were seeing on television. And then fast forward 30 years later, they create a game that that recaptures that feeling and that visual style and transforms it into something amazing. It's a work of art, that game. So yeah, it's really cool to see that this stuff is starting to have a second act and be transformed and presented to players and audiences in new ways.
Indeed. And I came up to be in school at the tail end of the educational film era. It was only really a thing for like the first 2 or 3 years of my being in school. So I saw it go, I kind of waved goodbye to it, but I still have a huge appreciation for that aesthetic. The old Coronet films, the Encyclopedia Britannica films that we got to know through the shows. I mean, and obviously it's one of Rifftrax's cash cows making those little shorts.
Yeah. I totally miss that era. I think I grew up in the only real films that we watched in school were all tied to like the DARE or anti-drug say no to drugs initiatives, and it was always about drugs. Anytime they would pull us all into like the auditorium or the gym, it's like someone's gonna be talking about drugs. Yeah, and I don't know if anyone else had this experience. I grew up in the Northeast, but we used to have these they weren't even like video. They would set up like 3 projector screens, and it was like slides. It was kind of like a slideshow, but it was a little bit more flashy than your run-of-the-mill slide carousel. But it was like sponsored by Pepsi, and it was all about like not doing drugs, and they try to make it cool. So they play like Metallica songs or like Linkin Park.
Wow.
And yeah, there'd be like, and it was all like a slideshow. So it'd be like, hey man, you want to smoke a cigarette? Sure. And then like, the kid smokes a cigarette, and then cut to like, enter night, and they're like playing Metallica, and they're showing the kid's life collapse, and you're just like, this what like what am I looking at? And of course brought to you by Pepsi throughout the entire thing. He's drinking a Pepsi. That was the kind of films I grew up with.
There was one that I caught, and they actually brought it back in middle school. I don't know why, because it was way outdated by that point, but I think it was a film from the early 70s, and they were trying to just talk about responsibilities, and it's called The Magic House. I've never seen the guys do this, but I really hope they do this just because I want to see this come back again. It was called The Magic House. His brother and his sister owned a doll house, which they found out was magic. It could grant wishes, and they wished that their parents wouldn't be so responsible all the time. So they wake up the next day, and the parents are like, nah, we don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to go to work. We don't want to cook breakfast. They're obviously stoned. They won't actually say that, but they're clearly on drugs. And the kids can't figure out how to break the spell, so they just burn the house down, because that's clearly what makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even come up with a moral of the story other than if your parents are stupid, burn down a house. I mean, that's really all. But it killed like
Arson, it might be the answer, you know?
yes. So yeah, I hope this thing comes to light sometime because I truly want to see it again.
Yeah, yeah, I love that stuff. And you know, we found there was a little bit of overlap between I think one or two of the films in Rifftrax that were also in What the Dub, but you know, as I mentioned, you know, they're sitting on 15 plus years of content. So they're very quickly able to go through the list. Hey, we know we can get clips out of these films and this film, and you know, pulling from stuff like The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. You know, there's a film, I think is it Charade? It's like a Audrey Hepburn movie, and you're just like, whoa, okay. So there's like kind of like a legit film in there amongst all this other schlock. Versus, yeah, you know, with What the Dub, we were just watching endless PSAs. And I mean, you'd watch a 20-minute film about, you know, wheat, and there would be nothing to pull, nothing usable for the game because, you know, you got to find that setup and punchline kind of rhythm to the clip so that players can use it. And there was nothing more devastating than spending like a day watching hours and hours of public domain footage. And then you're walking away with like 6 clips, you know, like that sucked. That was the hardest part about making that game. So it was a relief when they're like, yeah, we got all these films. They've all been vetted. They're all totally cleared. We can use any part of them. And we know exactly which clips to pull. You're just like, oh, I don't have to learn about you know, washing my hands or you know, plutonium or how to build a steel building or something, you know, just like this early 20th century nonsense.
Yeah, and you have the advantage of, well, if it's almost an advantage if you have to use the whole movie because then you don't have to sector out the clips. But in your case, that's really your goal.
Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of more the Rifftrax teams, their domain where they were able to go into their content, cut it up, you know, present it to us, and these are the clips that work, these are clips that don't work, this fits the format, this needs a tweak. But pulling the content and finding out what works in this format was a lot easier, just having the knowledge from What the Dub and also the advantage of working with people who know bad movies so very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think someone pointed this out, the difference between, there's a big difference between a riff and a dub. You know, What the Dub, the hook is there's a missing line of dialogue. Put some words in this character's mouth and make it funny. Whereas a riff is more, I guess, kind of like abstract. Like you don't have to literally put words into a character's mouth. It's just a general observation. It could be a non sequitur. It could be you know, you find something very specific in that film to comment on. And it opens it up. It feels like it's easier to play. It's easier to be funny. There's less pressure. And then of course, you know, being able to, we included a riff for me button. So when you're playing the write a riff mode, if you find yourself stumped, just hit that button and it'll automatically play one of the custom generated riffs that the team made for each clip. So we have about 250 clips and there's about 9 to 12 custom jokes per clip. So even if every player hit that button, you wouldn't get a repeat. And the chances of you seeing that clip again after you played it is 0. So it gets to the back of the queue. So it keeps it fresh. We also have another mode that we added called Pick a Riff, where it's kind of more of like a Cards Against Humanity type flavor. Same format, we present you with a clip, but instead of writing the response, we will deal you 6 riffs and they're all randomized. And you kind of have to take what you have and see which one makes it work. You know, you might have a ringer in your deck and you're like, I don't know if I want to use this here. Maybe I'll save it for another one. And it gets very, it's super random because some of the riffs obviously do not belong to that clip. but it's great, and it takes a lot of the pressure off because you don't have to write, and it's a great intro game for, I think, people who are playing a party game. There's some pressure to be funny. With this, you're not. It's the power is in selecting what you think is the funniest kind of non sequitur versus having to use your brain and write it. So yeah.
And you've got to remember, when you get people together either at an in-person party or on a Twitch stream, there's always going to be that one person there that doesn't really know what this is all about. You get a bunch of people together, somebody hasn't seen the show before.
Totally.
Yeah, bring them into the fold gently. They're wondering why they can't hear the movie. This is a good way of working with them.
Yeah. I think Pick a Riff might be the sleeper in this game. We weren't sure. We're like, I don't know. Everyone loves, what the dub, writing and being crazy and basically just putting the most off the wall or, offensive thing they can think of in the clip. But yeah, to your point, this is a great intro, and it's also a great warm up, before you get into it, just to get you in that mindset of like, what kind of humor are we kind of going for here? And it's very Rifftrax. If you're a fan, you'll feel right at home. And if you're new, I think, as you said, it's a great intro. It's a great way to get into it.
Well, Jim, I am stoked about this. I am getting ready to download it tonight when it finally hits the internet. So it should be available by the time anybody hears this. Where can people follow this game, download it, buy it, and follow the adventures of you and your company?
Well, luckily the game is everywhere and anywhere. So it's on all platforms, all systems, Steam, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox, Series S and X, Nintendo Switch, PC and Mac. Game retails for $9.99. Aiming for a good price point. It's got remote play, cross play. So if you got friends on Xbox and you're on Switch, you can still play together remotely. And yeah, we are at Wide Right Games on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or you can go right to widerightgames.com and check us out there.
Okay, I'm going to put links to all this information in the show notes on my website, aaronbossig.com. Jim, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of the release schedule to talk with me here. I can't wait to play this game.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great talking to you too.